everyone, Chris here, and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing Phase 10, Chooses My TBR. Phase 10 is a TBR game I've based on the card game Phase 10. I will leave the playlist linked in the description below. If you go to the first video of that, I go into more detail about how it's played. So before we dive into the game, I also want to remind everybody that I am participating in Buzzword-a-thon, Middle Grade Monthly, A Touch of Whimsy's book club, the Adventures in History book club, Witchlands Along, and the BookTube Spin. Obviously, I'm going to try to get those books on my TBR. If not, I will talk about them at the end. The information for all of those book clubs and readathons and read-alongs will be in the description below. I'm also participating in Desertathon, which is hosted by Esme from Bookish Buddies, and I did a whole TBR video about that, which I will link in the description below. So now, let's get into the game. As you can see, I've got the board all ready to go. I'm just looking for a 5 to complete this phase, and then I'll get to move on to Phase 7. I've got my cards here, my dice should I need it, and my prompts. So let's dive in. Draw number 1. It's a red 3. And the prompt for red 3 is LGBTQ plus rep. So first up, I got LGBTQ plus rep, and for this, I'm going to be reading Lost in the Neverwoods by Aiden Thomas. This is a Peter Pan retelling, I believe. And while I don't know for certain that there's LGBTQ plus rep in the book, I know that Aiden Thomas is part of the LGBTQ plus community, so this definitely has rep in that form as the author is part of the community. So I really loved Cemetery Boys, and I'm hoping to love this one as well. Draw number 2. It's a red 7. The prompt for red 7 is People on the Cover. For People on the Cover, I'm going to be reading The In-Between by Rebecca K.S. and Sari. I believe in this we follow a boy named Cooper. It says, ever since his father left their family 3 years ago, Cooper has become distant from his friends, constantly annoyed by his little sister Jess, and completely fed up with the pale, creepy rich girl who moved in next door and won't stop staring at him. So when Cooper learns of an unsolved mystery his sister has discovered online, he welcomes the distraction. It's the tale of a deadly train crash that occurred 100 years ago, in which one young boy among the dead was never identified. The only distinguishing mark on him was a strange insignia on his suit coat, a symbol no one had seen before or since. Jess is fascinated by the mystery of the unknown child because she's seen the insignia. It's the symbol on the jacket of the girl next door. As they uncover more information and mounting evidence of the girl's seemingly impossible connection to the tragedy, Cooper and Jess begin to wonder if a similar disaster could be heading to their hometown. Thus begins a dark, twisty adventure about the forgotten among us and what it means to be seen, from the acclaimed author of The Missing Piece of Charlie O'Reilly. So yeah, as you can see, there are multiple people on the cover, so this definitely will fulfill that prompt, and it sounds like an interesting book. Draw 3 is a skip. Could come in handy. Knowing my luck with wilds, it will definitely come in handy. Draw 3 part 2 is a 2. So far, lots of reds. The prompt for red 2 is prompt from a readathon you aren't taking part in. So next up, I got prompt from a readathon that you aren't taking part in. And so I went to Twitter and I found the Royal Readathon. This readathon will be taking place from May 23rd to May 29th. And I will list all of the info about that in the description below if you want to take part. The prompt I chose was Sleeping Beauty. Read a book that has been on your shelf a long time, and for this I will be reading Karma Girl by Jennifer Estep. I have had this book for ages. I know I have read it before, so this is a reread for me. If memory serves, it has something to do with superheroes, and I believe there's a bit of romance in it, and I wanted to reread it to see if it's something that current day me is still into, because I know my reading tastes have changed a lot since I was younger and I would have read this book, so I want to give it a reread to see if it's something I still want to keep. Draw 4 is a blue 7. adult. Next up, I got adult, and for this, I'm going to be reading The Dating Plan by Sarah Desai. This, I believe, is a fake dating romance. Actually, I think they get fake engaged. Yeah, it says, even with a step-by-step plan, these fake fiancés might accidentally fall for each other in this hilarious, heartfelt romantic comedy. So when it's done well, I really like the fake dating trope, and I believe I've heard some pretty decent things about this book, so I'm looking forward to seeing how this fake engagement plays out and how presumably these two characters who are pretending to be engaged actually fall in love. Draw 5 is a yellow 7. Now we have 7s that are popular too. Reread. Next up, I got Reread, and for this, I will be reading Through the Grinder by Cleo Coyle. This is the second book in the Coffee House Mystery series. This is one of my series that I would like to either complete or catch up on in 2021. So when Reread came up, this was a no-brainer because I knew I was going to have to reread whatever books in the series I had already read before I could read the new ones because it had been so long. In this series, we follow Claire Cozy, and she works at a coffee house, and because this is a cozy mystery series, presumably she ends up finding a body and has to then figure out who killed the person. I don't know what happens in this one. I read the first one and I thought it was all right. I didn't dislike it, but it wasn't like my favorite book ever. So since I own like the first 6, I want to continue my reread. This, like Karma Girl before, is another book that I've had on my shelf for so long that I'm wondering if it's still something that current me is into. So it's a good time to continue on with this series. Draw 6. Say blue 2. One word title. Next up, I got one word title, and for this, I'm going to be reading Pax by Sarah Pennypacker. I believe in this, we follow a fox. Pax and Peter have been inseparable ever since Peter rescued him as a kid. But one day, the unimaginable happens. Peter's dad enlists in the military and makes him return the fox to the wild. At his grandfather's house, 300 miles away from home, Peter knows he isn't where he should be, with Pax. He strikes out on his own despite the encroaching war, spurred by love, loyalty, and grief, to be reunited with his fox. Meanwhile, Pax, steadfastly waiting for his boy, embarks on adventures and discoveries of his own. So yeah, it sounds like a sweet story of a boy and his fox, and Pax is a one-word title, so it's a good time to pick this up. Draw 7 is an 8. Favorite trope. Next up, I got favorite trope, and for this, I'm going to be reading The Forbidden Expedition by Alex Bell. This is the second book in the Polar Bear Explorers Club. One of my favorite tropes is kind of a found family or a strong friendship group, and the first book definitely had this, so I'm assuming the second book will as well. The first book is one of my favorite books that I've read this year, so I'm really hoping that I love this book too. In the first book, we're following Stella, who wants to join the Polar Bear Explorers Club like her father. Unfortunately, they don't allow girls, but her dad manages to convince them to give her a shot, so she sets out as a junior explorer. On their first mission, her and the other junior explorers get separated from the group and have to kind of make their way through the frozen tundra and try to get back to the adults in the group. Like I said, I really love that book, and I'm hoping I continue to enjoy this series. Draw 8 is a 10. Book with a rainbow on the cover. Next up, I got book with a rainbow on the cover, and while I didn't have a book that had like an actual rainbow, I decided to go with The Land of Stories, The Ultimate Book Hugger's Guide by Chris Colfer, because all of the colors of the rainbow are on the cover of this book. Like, the whole dust jacket is just so incredibly colorful that I felt like it really did fit this prompt perfectly. This is a companion novel to his Land of Stories series, and this is basically like a guide. It says it offers bonus chapters, inside information about the series, and more. And We're going to explore backgrounds and histories of many characters, places, and magic items throughout the series. So this sounds like it's going to be an interesting look at the series as a whole, and I'm looking forward to reading it. Draw 9 is a green 3. Was wondering if we were going to get any green. And the prompt for green 3 is A to Z title. For A to Z title, you saw I got L, and for this I'm going to be reading Liberty by Caitlin Greenidge. This is a historical fiction, and we're following, it says, an unforgettable story about one young black girl's attempt to find a place where she can be fully and only herself. We're following Liberty Sampson, who is a freeborn black girl in Reconstruction-era Brooklyn. So, I don't know much more about it than that, but I love historical fiction, so when L came up, I decided this was a good time to read this, and I'm actually really looking forward to this book. And the last of my regular draws, and hopefully the last of my draws in general for this month, draw 10, is a red 9. I think this is the first time since I started playing that I didn't have any wilds. A prompt for red 9. Fire on the cover or in the title. And lastly, I got fire on the cover and the title, and for this I'm going to be reading We Hunt the Flame by Hafsa Faisal. I'm counting flame as a fire word. It's as close as I could get on my bookshelf. This is a YA fantasy. Zafira is the hunter, disguising herself as a man when she braves the cursed forest of the Ars to feed her people. Nasir is the Prince of Death, assassinating those foolish enough to defy his autocratic father, the Sultan. If Zafira is exposed as a girl, all of her achievements will be rejected. If Nasir displays his compassion, his father will punish him in the most brutal of ways. Both Zafira and Nasir are legends in the kingdom of Arawiya, but neither wants to be. War is brewing, and the Ars sweeps closer with each passing day, engulfing the land in shadow. While Zafira embarks on a quest to uncover a lost artifact that can restore magic to her suffering world and stop the Ars, Nasir is sent by the Sultan on a similar mission: retrieve the artifact and kill the hunter. But an ancient evil stirs as their journey unfolds, and the prize they seek may pose a threat greater than either can imagine. Set in a richly detailed world inspired by ancient Arabia, We Hunt the Flame is a gripping debut of discovery, conquering fear, and taking identity into your own hands. So yeah, it sounds like it's going to be an interesting little fantasy, and flame for me is close enough to fire to count. So now I'm going to go into the books from my various book clubs and read-alongs and stuff that I couldn't get on the May TBR. First up, I've got Tristan Strong Destroys the World by Kwame Mbalia. The middle grade monthly pick is Tristan Strong Punches a Hole in the Sky, and since I've already read that, I decided that this was a good time to stick the sequel on my TBR. In the first book, we follow Tristan, who is staying with his grandparents and dealing with the death of a friend. And he ends up with his friend's journal, and in the middle of the night, something steals his friend's journal, and so he ends up chasing after whatever or whoever stole his friend's journal and ends up punching a hole in a tree, which leads him to another world, and he then has to go on an adventure. And I really enjoyed that book and that world. It's a world that has African-American folktale heroes and West African gods. So I really liked learning about that mythology and those characters as they are completely new to me. That is one of the things I love about the Rick Riordan Presents line, is that it introduces me to all sorts of different mythologies and characters that I have never heard of before. And I really enjoyed Tristan's first adventure, and I'm looking forward to diving back into his world with him. Next up is the A Touch of Whimsy book club, and they will be reading When You Trap a Tiger by Tay Keller. I know absolutely nothing about this book, but I know it's middle grade, and the cover is stunning. So let's see, it says, "Harmonia," I whispered. "Will you tell us a story?" My grandmother smiled, took a deep breath, and began with the Korean version of Once Upon a Time. Long, long ago when Tiger walked like man. So it sounds like it's going to be a story that a grandmother is telling her grandchild, and maybe it has something to do with a tiger. I don't know. I guess I'll find out when I read it, but I'm looking forward to checking it out. Next up is the next book in the Witchlands along, and that is Sight Witch by Susan Dennard. This is book 2.5 in the Witchland series. I'm still really enjoying this series, and I'm looking forward to reading this novella in the series and seeing how it adds to the overall world before I read book 3 next month. For Buzz Wordathon, the word was house or home, and for this I'm going to read Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. This is a thriller about a girl whose father wrote a story about a haunted house, and it is based on a house they actually lived in. And as an adult, she has no idea what the real story is of why they left that house, because they did actually only live in this house for a very short period of time. And I know this book is told in alternating chapters, where like one chapter is from, what's her name, Maggie's point of view in current day, and then the next chapter is from the book that her dad wrote about what happened to them when they lived in this house. I've heard really, really great things about Riley Sager in general and this book, so I'm looking forward to checking it out. Next up for my booktube spin, I got Doggone It by Spencer Quinn. This is a mystery about a guy named Bernie who is down on his luck and is a private investigator, and Chet, his wise and lovable canine companion, and the dog is the narrator, and they're going to be solving some sort of mystery, and it's been on my bookshelf for a while. So when the booktube spin picked it, I was actually pretty excited because this will give me the kick in the butt I need to finally read this book. And lastly is the Adventures in History Book Club, and their pick this month is Where the Lost Wander by Amy Harmon. I believe this is about the Oregon Trail. Yeah, it says the trail may take their lives or lead them home. I don't really know much more about it other than, like I said, it's set on the Oregon Trail, and I don't believe I've ever read a historical fiction set around the Oregon Trail. So I'm actually really excited to read this book and get to see this particular time period play out in a novel, as it's one I've never read about. So these are some of the books I'm going to read in the month of May. What is a book you're hoping to get to in the month of May? If you've made it this far in the video, leave me a horse emoji, like this video, and subscribe to my channel, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye!